Q&A here, and today's topic is dealing with the biblical flood, the story of Noah, Ham, Shem, and Japheth. Now, according to this mythical flood, they landed on the mountains of Ararat, which can be seen in the book of Genesis, chapter 8, verse 4. And the ark resteth in the 7th month, in the 17th day of the month, on the mountains of Ararat. And the first question we have to ask is, how did Moses know that, or whoever wrote the book of Genesis chapter 8, know that these mountains were called Ararat? That brings me to the first question. Where is the mountains of Ararat located? All right, we see that it's part of the Southern Caucasus region today, which would be in Turkey, Armenia. All right. And we have to understand when we're dealing with the Bible, especially the Tanakh and the Brit Hadashah, we're dealing with geographical locations. We're not dealing with the whole wide world. All right. This is one thing that a lot of people who believe in the Bible misunderstand. They think everybody's part of the Bible, that everybody in the world is part of this, and it's just not the case. However, what is the case is that the mountains of Ararat was located in a place where it was known by a people called Aratu. All right, so this is the where you can find this map: biblical history, maps, images, archaeology. All right, it says during the time of the Old Testament, the ancient world extended from Egypt to Asia Minor over to the Caspian Sea and down to the Persian Gulf, 1,000 miles from north to south and nearly 1,500 miles from west to east. Only about 1/3 of the whole area of the ancient Near East was inhabitable and not desert, equaling about the size of California and Oregon combined. All right, so we're dealing with the area of the mountains of Ararat, which, as I said before, would be in present day Turkey and Armenia. Turkey took that land over, and the question remains is, where did Moses or whoever wrote the book of Genesis chapter 8 get the name Ararat from? Remember, this is very important. How did they know that the mountains they landed on was Ararat unless they were already in the land? All right, so extending from the Caspian Sea to Asia Minor, this range formed the center from which the other 4 ranges connected. Noah's Ark rested on one of the peaks of this range after the waters of the flood have subsided. Now, for those that believe in a global flood, we're going to see exactly where the biblical flood comes from. There's a lot of mythical floods and stories that's found all over the world, but we're going to see that this particular flood is a mirror spitting image of the Epic of Gilgamesh. All right. The Caspian Mountains branch of the Ararat extended eastward around the southern shore of the Caspian Sea. The Zagros Mountains start from the Ararat and extend to the southeast as far as the Persian Gulf. The Lebanon Mountains extend from the Ararat in a southwesterly direction through Syria and Palestine to Mount Sinai between the 2 gulfs of the Red Sea. The range is broken, but evidently Mount Sinai belongs to the same range. The Taurus or Taurus Mountains branch from the Ararat to the west and form the southern boundary of Asia Minor. All right, these are the great rivers, the 6 great rivers that connects to the mountains of Ararat. The Araxes River rises in the Ararat Mountains and flows eastward into the Caspian Sea. The Tigris River, also called Hiddekel in the Genesis chapter 2 verse 14, flows from the Mount Ararat Mountains southeastward into the Persian Gulf. The Euphrates River, the largest river of the Tanakh world, finds its source in the Ararat Mountains, flows west to the Taurus Mountains, then southeastward, and finally unites with the Tigris and empties into the Persian Gulf. All right, and these are the main countries that we're gonna focus really on the Bible, as far as descendants coming down from the mountains of Ararat in Assyria, Elam, Mesopotamia, Chaldea, and Arabia. We also have Asia Minor, Syria, Phoenicia, which is Canaan, the wilderness, and Egypt. So all these rivers that connect. But remember, if you've watched my Will the Real Cushites Please Stand Up, we know that the rivers that surrounded Cush wasn't in Egypt or Africa. It would have been more likely located in Iraq, Saudi Arabia, or Iran. So that's the major fundamental areas of where it would have been located. All right, finally, where does the word Ararat come from? As you see on the screen, we have Oratu. Oratu is very important because this is where exactly the name comes from. Ararat comes from Aratu, which is an Indo-Aryan word. So Aratu, Assyrian Mat Aratu, Babylonian Orashatu, Hebrew Ararat, is a geographical region commonly used as the exonym for the Iron Age kingdom, also known by the modern rendition of its endonym, the Kingdom of Van, centered around Lake Van in the historic Armenian highlands. The kingdom rose to power in the mid-9th century BCE, but went into gradual decline and was eventually conquered by the Iranian Medes in the early 6th century BC. Since its rediscovery in the 19th century, Aratu, which is commonly believed to have been at least partially Armenian-speaking, has played a significant role in Armenian nationalism. So we see the capital was established in 832 BC. All right. And it's a clear indication that the mountains of Ararat was described in this land. And if anybody knows the book of Jeremiah, chapter 51, verse 27, many in Ashkenaz with Ararat formed together. The kingdoms formed together. All right. Go ahead and bring up a video for y'all to watch.
We then have Noah's Ark landing on the Caucasian mountains about 4,500 years ago on Mount Ararat, which coincidentally is the home of the white race. Noah's Ark landing on the Caucasian mountains about 4,500 years ago on Mount Ararat, which coincidentally is the home of the white race. Noah's 3 sons and their sons dispersed in different directions from this point. So the old church tradition was that Noah and his sons were the white races, and that the flood was local, not global. The polytheistic Babylonians taught it was a global flood, like in the Epic of Gilgamesh. The Bible in Greek can be read either which way. So it's super interesting to see how the translators purposely translated the Bible to shift us into polytheism. So Noah's sons and grandsons divided and eventually mixed with other people. And so Noah's sons represent the three Caucasian groups. Now, today, the churches teach the whole world was submerged underwater and that only 8 people survived. Therefore, we are all the product of serious incest, and somehow Noah and his wife gave birth to one pure African son, one pure white son, and one pure Asian son, and we're all somehow related. However, all DNA, all archaeology, linguistics, and even our modern world testifies that exactly where Noah's Ark landed is the exact starting point for the white race. But of course, this view is racist and the modern day church view is more multicultural and therefore it's accepted. The Great Events from Great Historians, a collection from 1905, makes no apologies that Noah and his sons represent the three Caucasian groups, so this was a normal view in white Western Christian nations. Keep in mind that a lot of Africans would be considered more Caucasian today. There is a huge difference between Caucasian Africans and Negroid Africans. There is a huge difference between them culturally and genetically. So today, Caucasian doesn't necessarily mean white because of thousands of years of mixing. So yes, I believe Noah and his sons were Caucasian, hence why we call the mountains where Noah landed the Caucasian Mountains, where a giant ark-shaped object was found with the exact measurements found in the Bible, exactly where the Bible tells us to look for it. The first 3 major empires after the flood were the Hittites in Anatolia, Egypt or Mizra, who comes from Ham's son Mizraim, and the Semites from Shem, who ruled Mesopotamia after a Semite named Sargon of Akkad conquered Mesopotamia not long after the Bible says the flood happened. These kingdoms are recorded in secular history, and the Bible fully backs this up. So the Aryans or Indo-Europeans represent the Japhites, and in Greek mythology, 2 of the main gods who gave birth to all the gods were Gaia and Uranus, and they gave birth to a god named Iapetus or Japheth, who is also known as Japheth. He is one of the fathers of the Greeks. The Bible calls the Greeks Javan, who was a son of Japheth. If you go to your Bible concordance, you will see that under Javan it says Ionian Greek. Now the Bible mentions something pretty amazing about Japheth and Shem. In Genesis 9:27 it says, God shall enlarge Japheth, and he shall dwell in the tents of Shem, and Canaan shall be his servant. This is amazing because the Japhites or Aryans or Indo-Europeans would be enlarged, and they would come to dwell in Shem's tent, as the Japhites would mix with the Semites, and the 2 of them would lay the foundation of the modern day world, as the Canaanites would be conquered and replaced with the Israelites. When we look at Iranians, where the Aryans come from, we can still see the Aryan race in the genetics. Iranians are our distant brothers, and we share the same genetic roots. Even when we look in India, we see that the northern Indians are taller with a whiter complexion, showing an Aryan connection. Understand that India and Iran have suffered terribly at the hands of Arab invasions. Iranians are not from the same family as the Arabs. Iranians are part of the Indo-European family. This is why the swastika is called a symbol from India or Iran. It's because the Aryans stretched this far, hence that Japheth would be enlarged. When we look at language from India to Ireland, we see connections just through the words. In Sanskrit, which is Old Indo-Aryan and is the base for the Indian language today, we see similarities when we compare it with Old Persian, Latin, Greek, and even Gaelic. We see some serious connections. From Sanskrit to Old Persian, it's almost identical. Look at the words father, mother, and brother. Even when we compare it to German and English, Even when we look at Gaelic, Greek, and Latin, we can see the Aryan roots. So even after thousands of years, we can still see similarities in the languages. Now, the first name of the Aryans' country was called Arata. It was in the mountains somewhere near Iran and Armenia, like the mountain Ararat, Arata, where the Bible says Noah's Ark landed and became the name Arya, Aryan, which in Sanskrit, Arya means noble or noble one.
All right, I hope y'all enjoyed that video. So while I don't believe entirely everything he's saying as far as which people came down from Ararat, the biblical narrative and the chronology of the Bible, we do have a map of haplogroups which actually perfectly describe which people came down. So, for example, R1b in the Yemnaya during that time would have pushed down the J1s and J2s that was originally in the Caucasoids region, which is the mountains of Ararat. Now, that's when we find J1s heading towards Syria and Saudi Arabia, and from Syria to Akkad, and that's where the Semitic languages started coming into play in the Akkadian languages, the Semitic languages. But for some, they actually believe that Semitic languages started in North Africa and migrated up north. While I don't believe that theory because that contradicts the biblical narrative of a Shem coming down from the mountains of Ararat, I do believe that other haplogroups besides J1 and J2 played a significant role of the creation of Semitic languages. One is obviously E1B, 1B, 1B, 2. They have been in the Levant since the Neolithic times. Another haplogroup T2 or T1, they have been in the Levant since the Chalcolithic times. All right, and that's very important because some people believe, they only one haplogroup created the languages. No, I believe it was the borrowing of other words in different languages that formed these languages. As I said, we don't all come from the Caucasus Mountains. I don't believe such theories or the mountains of Ararat. All right, as we see, as I just brought up, this is the core axis or our axis, which is specifically that lines up exactly where the mountains of Ararat was located. And if you know biblical chronology, the timelines of the Bible, that's exactly when the so-called flood occurred and when they started migrating down to Iraq or Mesopotamia and the Levant. Now you can find this map or this illustration on ancient human genome-wide data from a 3,000-year interval in the Caucasus corresponds with ecogeographic regions. All right. So with that being said, go to the whole concept of the Great Floods. We want to know where it come from, right? So let's go. Let's get started.
The story of a great flood sent by God or the gods to destroy civilization as an act of divine retribution is a widespread theme among many cultural myths. It is best known from the biblical story of Noah, but there are several other famous versions. such as stories of Matsar in the Hindu Puranas, Deucalion in Greek mythology, and Utnapishtim in the Epic of Gilgamesh. Many of the world's cultures, past and present, have stories of a great flood that devastated earlier civilizations. A good deal of similarity exists between several of the flood myths, leading scholars to believe that these had evolved from or influenced each other. Others of these stories seem to be of a more local nature, although nearly all of them involve the survival of only a small number of humans who repopulate humankind. Contents. The scientific community is divided about the historicity of such an event as a great flood. Most archaeologists and geologists recognize that there were indeed major floods that devastated substantial civilized areas, but most deny that there was ever a single deluge in the last 6,000 years that covered the whole earth or even a major portion of it. Noah's Flood. A painting by the American artist Edward Hicks, 1780 to 1849, showing the animals boarding Noah's Ark 2 by 2. Although the story of Noah's flood may not be the most ancient of the flood stories, it is by far the most well-known. In the story recorded in the book of Genesis, God is saddened by seeing all the evil which has entered man's heart, and decides to destroy all living things on earth. Genesis 6:5-8. He selects Noah, who alone is righteous in his generation, and instructs him to build an ark and to preserve 2 of each creature. 1. Noah builds the ark and God makes it rain for 40 days and 40 nights. After 150 days, the ark comes to rest on the mountain of Ararat. Noah opens a window of the ark and sends forth a raven and a dove. After the earth becomes dry enough, Noah and his family, together with the animals, descend from the ark. Noah offers a sacrifice to God, who accepts his offering and promises, "Never again will I destroy all living creatures." Gen 8:21. God blesses Noah to be fruitful and multiply and places a rainbow in the sky as a sign of his covenant with Noah and his descendants. Noah then plants a vineyard and becomes drunk with wine. He falls asleep naked, and ends up cursing his grandson, Canaan, to be a slave to his brothers after Canaan's father, Ham, finds Noah sleeping naked in his tent. Ham, ashamed of his father's nakedness, informs his brothers of this. The story of Noah's flood may not be the most ancient of the flood stories that exist in cultures around the world. Non-biblical, the 2nd century BCE first book of Enoch is an apocryphal addition to the Hebrew flood legend, the cause of the evil mentioned in general. 6 is linked specifically to the Nephilim, the evil race of giants who are the titanic children of the angelic sons of God and human females. Enoch 9:9 explains that, as a result of these unnatural unions, the women bore giants, and thereby the whole earth has been filled with blood and iniquity. The Nephilim are also mentioned in Genesis 6, but in much less detail. Ancient Near East. The Deluge Tablet, Tablet 11 of the Epic of Gilgamesh in Akkadian. Sumerian. The Sumerian myth of Ziusudra tells how the god Enki warned Ziusudra, king of Shurapak, of the god's decision to destroy mankind in a flood. The passage describing why the gods have decided this is unfortunately lost. Enki instructs Ziusudra to build a large boat. After a flood of 7 days, Ziusudra opens the boat's window and then offers sacrifices and prostrations to him, the sky god, and Enlil, the chief of the gods. He is rewarded by being given eternal life in Dilmun, the Sumerian Eden. The myth of Ziusudra exists in a single copy, the fragmentary Ararat Genesis, datable by its script to the 17th century BCE. 2. The Sumerian King List, a genealogy of historical, legendary, and mythological Sumerian kings, also mentions a great flood. Babylonian, Epic of Gilgamesh. In the Babylonian Epic of Gilgamesh, the story of the flood is told in some detail, with many striking parallels to the Genesis version. The hero, Gilgamesh, seeking immortality, searches out the human immortal Utnapishtim in Dilmun, a kind of terrestrial paradise. Noah and his dove. In the Epic of Gilgamesh, it is Utnapishtim who survives the flood. I opened a vent and sunlight fell on the side of my face. I released a dove to go free. The dove went and returned. No landing place came to view. It turned back. Utnapishtim tells how the Babylonian equivalent of the Sumerian Enki, warned him of the god's plan to destroy all life through a great flood and instructed him to build a vessel in which he could save his family, his friends and servants, his cattle, and other wealth. The deluge comes and covers the earth. As in the Genesis version, Utnapishtim sends out both a dove and raven from his boat before descending on dry land. After the deluge, he offers a sacrifice to the gods, who repented their action and make Utnapishtim immortal. Akkadian Atrahasis epic. The Babylonian Atrahasis epic, written no later than 1700 BCE. The name Atrahasis means exceedingly wise, gives human overpopulation as the cause for the Great Flood. After 1,200 years of human fertility, the god-in-law feels disturbed in his sleep due to the noise and commotion caused by the growing population of mankind. He turns for help to the divine assembly who send a plague, then a drought, a famine, and then saline soil, all in an attempt to reduce the numbers of mankind. All these temporary measures prove ineffective as, 1,200 years after each solution, the original problem returns. When the gods decide on a final solution, to send a flood, the god Enki, who has a moral objection to this solution, discloses the plan to Atrahasis, who then builds a survival vessel according to divinely given measurements. To prevent the other gods from bringing another such harsh calamity, Enki creates new solutions in the form of social phenomena such as non-marrying women, barrenness, miscarriages and infant mortality, in order to help keep the population from growing out of control. Asia Pacific. China. An ancient painting of Nuwa and her consort Fuxi, unearthed in Xinjiang. Yu, the founding hero of Chinese legend, who controlled floodwaters that reached to the heavens. The ancient Chinese civilization was concentrated at the bank of Yellow River near present-day Xi'an. It was believed that the severe flooding along the riverbank was caused by dragons, representing gods, living in the river who were being angered by the mistakes of the people. There are many sources of flood myths in ancient Chinese literature. Some appear to refer to a worldwide deluge. The text of Shiji, Chusi, Lizi, Huarananzi, Shuanjizi, Siku Quanshu, Songsi Dashu, and others, as well as many folk myths, all contain references to a personage named Nuwa. Despite the similarity of her name to the biblical Noah, Nuwa is generally represented as a female who repairs the broken heavens after a great flood or other calamity, and repopulates the world with people.
I'm not sure why it stopped, but... Alright then. Guess I gotta do this the hard way. Sorry about that, y'all.
There are many versions of this myth. Shujing, or Book of History, probably written around 700 BCE or earlier, describes a situation in its opening chapters in which Emperor Yao is facing the problem of floodwaters that reach to the heavens. This is a backdrop for the intervention of the hero Yu, who succeeds in controlling the floods. He goes on to found the first Chinese dynasty. Shan Heijing, the classic of the mountain and seas, ends with a similar story of Yu spending 10 years to control a deluge whose floodwaters overflowed to heaven. Andaman Islands. In myths of the Aboriginal tribes inhabiting the Andaman Islands, the story goes that people became remiss in their duty to obey the commands given to them at the creation. Piluga, the creator god, ceased to visit them and then without further warning sent a devastating flood. Only 4 people survived this flood, 2 men, Larala and Poilala, and 2 women, Kalala and Ramalala. When they finally landed they found they had lost their fire, and all living things had perished. Piluga then recreated the animals and plants but does not seem to have given any further instructions, nor did he return the fire to the survivors until tricked into doing so by one of the survivors' recently drowned friends who reappeared in the form of a kingfisher. 3. India. Incarnation of Vishnu as a fish, from a devotional text. The Hindu version of Noah is named Manu. He is warned by an incarnation of Vishnu of the impending Great Flood, enabling him to build a boat and survive to repopulate the earth. According to the texts Matsaya Purana and Shatapatha Brahmana, I-8-1-6, Manu was a minister to the king of pre-ancient Dravida. He was washing his hands in a river when a little fish swam into his hands and begged him to save its life. He put the fish in a jar, which it soon outgrew. He successively moved it to a tank, a river, and then the ocean. The fish then warned him that a deluge would occur in a week that would destroy all life. It turned out that fish was none other than Matsaya, fish in Sanskrit, the first avatar of Vishnu. Manu therefore built a boat which Matsaya towed to a mountain top when the flood came, and thus he survived along with some seeds of life to re-establish life on Earth. Indonesia. In Batak traditions, the earth rests on a giant snake, Nagapadoha. One day, the snake tired of its burden and shook the earth off into the sea. However, the god Batara Guru saved his daughter by sending a mountain into the sea, and the entire human race descended from her. The earth was later placed back onto the head of the snake. Polynesia. Several flood stories are recorded among the Polynesians. However, none of them approach the scale of the biblical flood. The people of Rayatea tell of two friends, Tiahuero and Ru, who went fishing and accidentally awoke the ocean god Ruahita with their fish hooks. Angered, he vowed to sink Rayatea below the sea. Tiahuero and Ru begged for forgiveness, and Ruahita warned them that they could escape only by bringing their families to the island of Tomarama. These set sail, and during the night, Rayatea slipped under the ocean, only to rise again the next morning. Nothing survived except for these families, who erected sacred Mary temples dedicated to Ruahito. A similar legend is found on Tahiti. No reason for the tragedy is given, but the whole island sinks beneath the sea except for Mount Petohiti. One human couple managed to flee there with their animals and survived. In Hawaii, a human couple, Nuu and Lily No, survived a flood on top of Mauna Kea on the Big Island. Nuu made sacrifices to the moon, to whom he mistakenly attributed his safety. Cain, the creator god, descended to earth on a rainbow, explained Nuu's mistake, and accepted his sacrifice. In the Marquesas, the great war god who was angered by critical remarks made by his sister Hiaya. His tears tore through the heavens floor to the world below and created a torrent of rain carrying away everything in its path. Only 6 people survived. Australia and New Zealand. According to the Australian Aborigines, in the dream time a huge frog drank all the water in the world and a drought swept across the land. The only way to finish the drought was to make the frog laugh. Animals from all over Australia gathered together and one by one attempted to make the frog laugh. When finally the eel succeeded, the frog opened his sleepy eyes, his big body quivered, his face relaxed, and, at last, he burst into a laugh that sounded like rolling thunder. The water poured from his mouth in a flood. It filled the deepest rivers and covered the land. Only the highest mountain peaks were visible, like islands in the sea. Many men and animals were drowned. The pelican, who was blackfellow at that time, painted himself with white clay and was then swimming from island to island in a great canoe, rescuing other blackfellows. Since that time pelicans have been black and white in remembrance of the Great Flood. 4. In a tradition of the Ngati Porou, a Maori tribe of the east coast of New Zealand's North Island, Ruatapu, the child of the great chief Unuku, became angry when Unuku demoted Ruatapu for using the sacred comb of Kahusha Tirangi, the king's younger son. Ruatapu lured Kahusha Tirangi and a large number of young men of high birth into his canoe, and took them out to sea and drowned them all but Kahusha Tirangi. Ruatapu convinced the gods of the tides to destroy the land and its inhabitants. As he struggled for his life, Kahusha Tirangi recited an incantation invoking the southern humpback whales, Pakeha in Maori, to carry them ashore. Accordingly, he was renamed Pakeha, and was the only survivor of the flood. European flood stories.
All right, just want to let y'all know, this is live, so if you have any questions, if you can think of any questions, Please try to think of any, and I'll try to answer them the best as possible. And I can open up my Google Voice so people can call on. All right, let's get to the end of this part.
S. Greek. Greek mythology knows three floods: the flood of Ogyges, the flood of Deucalion, and the flood of Dardanus, two of which ended two ages of man. The Ogygian deluge ended the Silver Age, and the flood of Deucalion ended the first Bronze Age. Ogyges. The Ogygian flood is so called because it occurred at the time of Ogyges, 5, a mythical king of Attica. The name Ogyges is synonymous with primeval or earliest dawn. He was the mythical founder and king of Thebes. The Ogygian flood covered the whole world and was so devastating that the country remained without kings until the reign of Cecrops, 1556 to 1506 BCE. 6. Plato in his Laws, Book 3, estimates that this flood occurred 10,000 years before his time. Also in Timalius, 22, and in Critias, 111-112, Plato describes the Great Deluge of all during the 10th millennium BCE. The Deluge of Deucalion. The Deucalion legend, as told by Apollodorus in the library, has some similarity to Noah's flood, and the name Deucalion is related to wine, of which the biblical Noah was the inventor.
The one that stopped again. I don't know why. All right. Come on.
When the anger of Zeus was ignited against the hubris of the Pelasgians, Zeus decided to put an end to the first Bronze Age with the deluge. Prometheus advised his son Deucalion to build a chest or ark to save himself, and other men perished except for a few who escaped to high mountains. The mountains in Thessaly were parted, and all the world beyond the Isthmus and Peloponnese was overwhelmed. Deucalion and his wife Paha, after floating in a chest for 9 days and nights, landed on Parnassus. An older version of the story told by Hellanicus has Deucalion's ark landing on Mount Ophrys in Thessaly. Another account has him landing on a peak, probably Phauca, in Arglis, later called Nemea. When the rain ceased, he sacrificed to Zeus. Then, at the bidding of Zeus, he threw stones behind him, and they became men. His wife Paha, who was the daughter of Epimetheus and Pandora, also threw stones, and these became women. Dardanus. According to Dionysius of Halicarnassus, Dardanus, a son of Zeus and Electra, left Pheneus in Arcadia to colonize a land in the northeast Aegean Sea. When the deluge occurred, the land was flooded, and the mountain on which he and his family survived formed the island of Samothrace. Dardanus left Samothrace on an inflated skin to the opposite shores of Asia Minor and settled at the foot of Mount Ida. Due to fear of another flood, he did not build a city, but lived in the open for 50 years. His grandson Tros eventually built a city, which was named Troy after him. Germanic. The killing of Orgelme, whose death caused a deluge of blood which destroyed all of the frost giants except Bergelme. In Norse mythology, the giant Bergelme was a son of Thragelme and the grandson of Orgelme, the founder of the race of frost giants. Bergelme and his wife were the early frost giants to survive the deluge of Orgelme's blood, when Odin and his brothers butchered him. The giant couple survived by crawling into a hollow tree trunk, and then founded a new race of frost giants. Irish. According to the mythical history of Ireland, the first inhabitants of Ireland were led there by Noah's granddaughter Cessa. In one version of the story, when her father was denied a place in the ark by Noah, Cessa advised him to build an idol. This idol advised them that they could escape the deluge in a ship. Cessa, along with 3 men and 50 women, set off and sailed for more than 7 years. They landed in Ireland at Donemark, on Bantry Bay in County Cork, just 40 days before the flood. The 3 men shared the women as wives between them. 6 days before the flood, Caesar died of a broken heart at Kul Sisrat in Connacht. The rest of Caesar's people were wiped out in the flood, with the exception of one of the males, Fintan, who turned into a salmon. After a series of animal transformations, he eventually became a man again and told his people's story. Americas. Aztec. There are several variants of the Aztec flood story. One of the more famous is that of Nota, the Aztec version of Noah. However, this story is controversial for several reasons, especially because it was recorded by Spanish scribes well after Christian culture had a chance to interact with Aztec civilization.
Bam.
When the Sun Age came, they had passed 400 years. Then came 200 years, then 76. Then all mankind was lost and drowned and turned to fishes. The water and the sky drew near each other. In a single day all was lost. But before the flood began, Tithalachahuan had warned the man Nota and his wife Nina, saying, "Make no more pulki, but hollow a great cypress, into which you shall enter the month Tzostli. The waters shall near the sky." They entered, and when Tithalachahuan had shut them, and he said to the man, "Thou shalt eat but a single ear of maize, and thy wife but one also." And when they had each eaten 1 ear of maize, they prepared to go forth, for the water was tranquil. Ancient Aztec document Codex Chimalpopoca, translated by Abbé Charles Etienne Brasseur de Bourbourg. Inca. In Inca mythology, the god Viracocha, the creator of civilization, destroyed the giants, as well as the other inhabitants around Lake Titicaca with a great flood, and 2 people repopulated the earth. They survived in sealed caves. Maya. The Subsiding of the Waters of the Deluge, by Cole Thomas, 1829. In Maya mythology, from the Popol Vuh, Part 1, Chapter 3, Huracan, one-legged, was a wind and storm god. It is from his name that the English word hurricane is derived.
That's right.
Huracan caused the great flood of resin, after the first humans angered the gods because, being made of wood, they were unable to engage in worship. Huracan lived in the windy mists above the floodwaters and spoke earth until land came up again from the seas. Humans had become monkeys, but later, real people would emerge, and 3 men and 4 women repopulate the world after the flood. Hopi. In Hopi mythology, most people moved away from the ways of the creator god, Sotoknang, and he destroyed the world first by fire and then by cold, recreating it both times for the people that still followed the laws of creation, who survived by hiding underground. People became corrupt and warlike a 3rd time. As a result, Sotoknang guided the people to Spider-Woman, his helper in the creation process, and she cut down giant reeds and sheltered the people in the hollow stems. Sotoknang then caused a great flood, and the people floated atop the water in their reeds. The reeds came to rest on a small piece of land, and the people emerged, with as much food as they started with. The people traveled on in their canoes, guided by their inner wisdom, which is said to come from Sotoknang through the door at the top of their head. They traveled to the northeast, passing progressively larger islands, until they came to the 4th world, a great land mass. The islands then sank into the ocean. Caddo. In Caddo mythology, 4 monsters grew in size and power until they touched the sky. At that time, a man heard a voice telling him to plant a hollow reed. He did so, and the reed grew very big very quickly. The man entered the reed with his wife and pairs of all good animals. Waters rose and covered everything but the top of the reed and the heads of the monsters. A turtle then killed the monsters by digging under them and uprooting them. The waters subsided and winds dried the earth. Menominee. In Menominee mythology, Manabus, the trickster, fired by his lust for revenge, shot 2 underground gods when they and the other gods were at play. When they all dived into the water, a huge flood arose. The water rose up. It knew very well where Manabus had gone. He runs, but the water, coming from Lake Michigan, chases him faster and faster, even as he runs up a mountain and climbs to the top of the lofty pine at its peak. 4 times he begs the tree to grow just a little more, and 4 times it obliges until it can grow no more. But the water keeps climbing up, right to his chin, and there it stopped. There was nothing but water stretching out to the horizon. And then Manobos, helped by the diving animals and the muskrat, created the world as we know it today. Theories of origin. Shurapak, the site of Ziusagro's flood, was located south of the Iraqi city of Nippur. Archaeologists have discovered evidence of a major flood that devastated the area from Shurapak northward as far as Kish. Many Orthodox Jews and Christians believe that the flood happened as recorded in Genesis. It is often argued that the large number of flood myths in other cultures suggests that they originated from a common historical event, of which Genesis is the accurate and true account. The myths in various cultures, often cast in polytheistic contexts, are thus corrupted memories of an historical global deluge. In the early days of biblical archaeology, prominent academics believed they had discovered evidence for a historical worldwide flood. 7. But this view has been largely abandoned. Instead, it is generally agreed that devastating local floods, covering large flat areas such as those between the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, could easily have given rise to the stories of Ziusagra, Atrahasis, Utnapishtim, and Noah.
Bam!
8. Excavations in Iraq have shown evidence of a major flood at Shurapak about 902, 750 BCE, which extended nearly as far as the city of Kish, whose king Etana supposedly founded the first Sumerian dynasty after the flood. Flood geology is propounded by biblically oriented scientists who have tried to support the Great Flood theory scientifically, but this is not accepted by the majority of geologists, both Christian and non-Christian, who consider it a form of pseudoscience. 9. Black Sea today, light blue, and in 5600 BCE, dark blue, according to recent theories. Among other theories concerning the origins of the legends of a great flood, there has been speculation that a large tsunami in the Mediterranean Sea caused by the huge eruption of the volcano Terra, ca. 1630 to 1500 BCE, was the historical basis for folklore that evolved into the Deucalion myth. Some have also suggested that flood myths could have arisen from folk stories related to the huge rise in sea levels that accompanied the end of the last ice age some 10,000 years ago, passed down the generations as an oral history. In 1998, William Ryan and Walter Pittman, geologists from Columbia University, published evidence that a massive flood of waters from the Mediterranean Sea through the Bosporus occurred about 5600 BCE. Resulting in widespread destruction of major population centers around the Black Sea. It is suggested that this would have naturally resulted in various great flood myths, as major cities would have been lost to these waters.
Alright, so we're going to go back to the haplogroup tree, and let's get some understanding of the haplogroup gymnastics that people try to play to try to connect the whole world with this flood, the three sons coming down to Mesopotamia, Anatolia, and North Africa. So the theory is that haplogroup A and B, and haplogroup A had haplogroup CT. Now CT migrated out of Africa into the Middle East. Somehow it got on a boat and somehow drifted up to the Caucasus. That's what Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson believes, right? I don't believe that concept. I think that concept makes absolutely no sense, and here's why. Haplogroups take a long time to to develop. So if haplogroup CT went up to the Caucasus and it split off from CT to DE to CF and so forth and so on, how is it that we have all of these haplogroups in that short amount of time? So is it that the Bible is older than what the chronology of the Bible is, or is it that they're playing haplogroup gymnastics trying to fit something that doesn't exist, that doesn't make any sense? And I believe it's the later of the two. I don't believe all haplogroups came from the mountains of Ararat. It doesn't add up. It doesn't make any sense. All right, so let's see what I want to touch up on. And if you want to ask me any questions right now, feel free. If not, I'm going to continue trucking on. All right. We're going to start with the Syrians. If not, so the Syrians and their genetics, right? So paternal Y-DNA haplogroup J1, which reaches its highest frequencies in Yemen, 72.6%, and Qatar, 58.3%, accounted for 33.6% of Syrians. All right, the citations right there. The J2 group accounted for 20.8% of Syrians. Other Y-DNA haplogroups include the E1B1B, 12%, haplogroup I, 5%, R1A, 10%, and R1B, 15%. That's the two citations right there. The Syrians are closest to other Levantine populations: the Palestinians, Lebanese, and Jordanians. This closeness can be explained with the common Canaanite ancestry and geographical unity, which was broken only in the 20th century with the advent of British and French mandates. Regarding the genetic relation between the Syrians and the Lebanese based on Y-DNA, Muslims from Lebanon show closer relation to Syrians than their Christian compatriots. The people of Western Syria show close relation with the people of Northern Lebanon. All right. Let's see. Other haplogroup I want to do. Let's do Canaanites, shall we? All right. The genetic study of the Canaanites, right? A 2020 genetic analyst has found that the Bronze Age Canaanite population descended from earlier local Neolithic populations together with populations related to the Chalcolithic Zagros Mountains in the Bronze Age Caucasus. According to the researchers, this mixture is probably the result of a continuing migration from the Zagros and or Caucasus to the Levant between 2500 to 1000 BCE. The study also shown that the Canaanite population contributed to most present-day Jewish groups and Levantine Arabic-speaking groups. These populations are consistent with having 50% or more of their ancestry from people related to the groups who lived in the Bronze Age Levant and the Chalcolithic Zagros. These present-day groups also show ancestries that cannot be modeled by the available ancient DNA data, highlighting the importance of additional major genetic effects on the region since the Bronze Age. All right, some importance. So this is found in the article Continuity and the Admixture in the Last 5 Millennia of Levantine History from Ancient Canaanite and Present-Day Lebanese genome sequences. We show that present-day Lebanese derive most of their ancestry from a Canaanite related population, which therefore implies substantial genetic continuity in the Levant since at least the Bronze Age. In addition, we find Euro-Asian ancestry in the Lebanese not present in Bronze Age or early Levantines. We estimate that this Euro-Asian ancestry arrived in Levant around 3,750 to 2,170 years ago during a period of successive conquest by distant populations. says haplogroup J dash page 58 is frequent in the Arabian Peninsula with proposed origins in the Zagros on Taurus Mountain region. I think that's it. I want to bring from this one. All right. All right. So the point that I'm trying to show to everybody is that the fact is that the Canaanites, who are supposedly the sons of Ham, who Ham, Shem, and Japheth, all together with their so-called forefather Noah, landed in the mountains of Ararat, right? So if the Canaanites are showing ancestry that goes back into the Caucasus, that means what? That means the story is somewhat true, or that's the reason why it's written in the Bible that way? I mean, we have to use common sense, right? We have to use logic. I'm just saying, you have to use logic behind that. So, were the Canaanites from Iran? A genomic history shows that Israelis, Palestinians, Lebanese have Zagros ancestry. This is by Juan Cole. And he breaks down the genomic history published in Cell. And it shows the people had originally come from where these mountains of Ararat were located. And they migrated south. So why did these people go up to the Caucasus or the southern Caucasus after the Chalcolithic period, starting the early Bronze Age and migrating back down? Why was that? Here we go. The Chalcolithic period in the Zagros Mountain range stretched from 5500 BC to 3300 BC and is marked by distinctive ceramics. Some of those people trekked down to the southern Levant and helped found the land of Canaan, of which ancient neighbors spoke and to which the Hebrew Bible often refers. All right. All right. The Canaanites existed as multiple city-states from 3800 BC. Along the coast, the small kingdoms were oriented to Mediterranean trade. The principalities to the east in the hinterland practiced distinctive forms of agriculture, and there were pastoralists who wandered arid, marginal land in search of pasturage for their sheep, goats, and other animals. They spoke or came to speak a Semitic language. So regardless if they originated the Semitic languages or not, they started speaking it. Just like the Israelites. What was Abraham originally speaking a Semitic language, or was he speaking the Canaanite language, Phoenician language? You tell me if Abraham actually existed. Phoenician and Hebrew are essentially dialects of Canaanite, and Phoenician and Hebrew culture are developments out of Canaanite culture, y'all. Y'all see it? Canaanite culture. And we know that the so-called Israelites or Hebrews were nothing but thieves. That's all they did. They stole circumcision from the Egyptians. They stole fringes from the Sumerians or the Assyrians. They stole burning of incense from the Egyptians. What else? The language, they stole that from the Canaanites. Or were they Canaanites themselves? I'm just saying. People came down from the Zagros either directly or through the Caucasus and what is now eastern Turkey, or both. The author writes, "We reason that the Chalcolithic Zagros component might have arrived into the southern Levant through the Caucasus and even more proximally the northeastern areas of the ancient Near East. Although we have no ancient DNA sampling from this region, this movement might not have been limited to a short pulse and instead could have involved multiple waves through the Bronze Age. That's what I've said before. I said that J2 and J1 came in multiple migration waves. They didn't all came at the same time. I mean, you had the Amorites that came from Syria, and then they went to Akkad in Iraq. So what? The Akkadians weren't originally speaking the Semitic language, but they became the first Semitic speakers. That's the first Semitic speakers were the Akkadians. But weren't the Amorites speaking the Akkadian language too, or a Semitic language too? And why did they go extinct for? So is this part of the multiple migration waves? Did they just like move from point A to point B and become different cultures? We got to think. You got to use some logic, because why else would cultures just go extinct? Does that mean they just died off, or does that mean that they created another culture, like, Babylonians, that they become Babylonians? So was the Babylonians, according to the Bible, were they first a non-Semitic people of like Cush, and then they became Semitic? Is that where the theory in the Bible is coming from? All right. So as for when people came down or came from the Zagros down into the Levant, they suggest that gene flow into the region started before circa 2400 BCE. This is consistent with the hypothesis that people of the Araxes archaeological complex of the 3rd millennium BCE might have affected the southern Levant not only culturally, but also through some degree of movement of people. Our data is also imply an increase in the proportion of Zagros-related ancestry after the Intermediate Bronze Age. Try to I'm wrapping this up so I can get to any questions. Let's see. The northeast Zagros was dominated in the 2000s BC by the Hurrian people, who had a distinctive language that may not be related to any of the known major language families. That is, it may be what the linguists call an isolate. The Hurrian civilization petered out around 1000 BC. Decrease or fade gradually before coming to an end. The Canaanites were likely not one ethnic group, but many. Y'all see that? Bam! Though they may have gradually adopted a common language, they were ruled by many different kingdoms, including in the 2nd millennium BC, the Pharaonic Egyptians. Akhenaten, the pharaoh who tried to make a semi-monotheistic move toward worshiping the sun god Aten, ruled the Canaanites. Owen Joris at Live Science explains that the Amarna letters at the 1300 BC show that Egypt held considerable power over the Canaanite kings. One letter written by a king of Babylon named Barabbas complains about the killing of Babylonian merchants in Canaan, and reminds Egypt's pharaoh that the land of Canaan is your land and its kings are your servants. Translation from Brandon Ben's book, The Land Before the Kingdom of Israel. Egyptian texts also show that Egypt's pharaohs sent military expeditions into Canaan. A stele erected by a pharaoh named Merneptah reigned circa 1213 to 1203 BC claimed that the Canaan has been plundered into every sort of woe. The same stele also claims that Merneptah laid waste to Israel. So from what I take out of that is Canaan was always plundered. What does it say in the Bible? That they were going to be servants of servants? Is this the reason why they wrote that? That Canaan would be the servants of servants because Canaan was always getting plundered? How interesting. Very interesting. All right, Genome Web writes of the cell study. Ludovic Orlando, a molecular anthropologist and geogenetic researcher affiliated with the University of Toulouse and the University of Copenhagen, emphasized that populations, thus ancestries, are not static through space and time, and no modern groups can be depicted as descending from unique ancestors who once inhabited a single region. There are no races. Mm-hmm. There are no races, according to him. That's what Ludwig Orlando believes. No races at all. All right. In this Cell article, The Genomic History of the Bronze Age Southern Levant, just to further prove the point, archaeological and historical research has documented major changes during the Bronze and Iron Ages, such as the cultural influence of the Northern Caucasian populations related to the Araxes tradition during the early Bronze Age, and effects from the Sea peoples such as the Philistines and who else? The Danoi from the west in the beginning of the Iron Age. The inhabitants of the southern Levant in the Bronze Age are commonly described as Canaanites, that is, residents of the land of Canaan. Just like I live in America. What am I called? An American. I live in Florida, so what am I called? A Floridian American. So what were those Israelites called? Israelite Canaanites. If you watch my previous videos, you know what I'm talking about. Hilarious. All right. Finally, we showed that the genomes of present-day groups are geographically and historically linked to the Bronze Age Levant, including the great majority of present-day Jewish groups and Levantine Arabic-speaking groups are consistent with having 50% or more of their ancestry from people related to the groups who lived in the Bronze Age Levant and the Chalcolithic Zagros. Bam! And if people don't know the Bronze Age Levant, haplogroup J became the most dominant haplogroup in the Bronze Age Levant. So there's no more questions who these people are, and according to the Noah, where they came from originally. Do we all come from the mountains of Ararat? Absolutely not. But these people, I'm just saying, why would they write it in the book if they didn't come there from there? Why would they have that concept, that notion that they originally came from the Southern Caucasus or the mountains of Ararat if they didn't come there? Why would they write that in the book for? I got to make it make sense for me. Let's see what else I want to write or do. This one. Like I said, if y'all want to ask me any questions, please do so. In the live chat, you can type in there, and we can go over your live questions. All right, so the Habiru. All right, so a lot of people want to say that haplogroup J are like the Hurrians or the Habiru, the Hittites, right? And it says, according to this, the philological equivalents of the words Hebrew and Hebrew are accepted by all authorities. So this is the book Man and His Gods by Homer William Smith, 1895 to 1962. It's published in 1952. So I thought that's very important because all of these people originally came from the mountains of Ararat. Like they came from that region of the Araxes. They would autosomally be traced back to those people. Oh, this is a good one, right? So in this article, it's called The Genetic Structure of Nomadic Bedouin from Kuwait. All right. The importance of this article, so it's going down the Adnani and the Khatani, and these two male lineages are this descendant of Ishmael, if I'm not mistaken. Um, yeah, and they belong to the Islamic prophet Muhammad. This the tribes that the prophet Muhammad belongs to. And the craziest part about this is that they can trace their lineage from him, could be traced further back to Adam. So which Adam? Are they talking about the biblical Adam? I'm guessing so. So how are they able to trace their lineage back to the biblical Adam, but not everybody can? You see what I'm saying? Because we know that the Eurasian Adam is not the Adam of all haplogroups belong to, haplogroup A. There's a difference. There's a difference between the 5,782-year-old Adam and the Adam that we all belong to. All right, just to further prove that it's talking about Ishmael, the Bedouin conventionally claim descent from two main lineages, from Adnan, son of Ishmael, the Adnani lineage, or from Khatan or Jaktan, the Khatani or Jaktani lineage. So samples for DNA analysts were collected from volunteers from the Adnani tribes of Al-Anazai, Mutran, and Awazim, a Suluba tribe, and the Khatani tribes of Ajman, Shimar, and Mora. This selection is representative of the most predominant tribes of Adoni and Khatani lineages of Arabia. Results from the sample were compared with data from other populations derived from the lecture. All right, and we can see exactly the tribes, how they were broken down, or the lineages were broken down to. I color coded them for you. Zoom in for y'all so y'all can see. And when we're gonna see what haplogroup they belong to, right? We're gonna see. We gonna see. All right. All right. It says the network for haplogroup J contain many high dimensional reticulations, collations, reticulations. There we go. Reticulations. All right. I just want the haplogroups. Give it to me. Here we go. There we go. Y'all see what haplogroup pops up for having the most matches? J-M269. Yep. So these are the people that trace their lineage back to Ishmael. And they can trace their lineage all the way back to Adam. Which haplogroup in the Awazim? EM123, which is the forefather or the upstream haplogroup of EM34 and EM84. Who has the floor? Who has it? Y'all tell me. Does haplogroup J have it, or does haplogroup E1B1B1B2 have it? We see that JM267 are the ones claiming to be descendants of Ishmael. No doubt about it. All right. They share some Y chromosomal features with the Negev Bedouins a high frequency of haplogroup J1 and low STR diversity within it. But none of the Kuwaiti individuals sampled carries the Bedouin model haplotype, and thus their recent genetic history is distinct. All right, slavery among the chieftains was a sign of power and wealth. Anazar tribes like those of Banu Halal and Banu Shalamim are believed to have participated in the conquest of North Africa in the 11th century CE, possibly leading to the introduction of EM78 chromosomes. All right, so we see that it was these people of carrying haplogroup J that brought EM78 chromosomes into slavery. All right. Dawazim stand out because of their high frequency of haplogroup EM123, like I said, 24.3%, the highest yet reported in any population. The highest frequency reported previously, 23.5%, was in Ethiopians from Amara. It has also been proposed that the Awazim may have originated from the what? From the what, y'all? The Caucasus. Oh man, they came from the Caucasus. Also consistent with the theory of Saluba. The presence of markers M123 and M124 may also suggest what, y'all? That slaves brought before the initiation of Islam and after the passing of the four caliph eras have been neutralized within these tribes, perhaps when slavery was abolished. So which people were doing the slavery? Haplogroup J1. What did Abraham, the mythical Abraham, do when he came into Levant? He enslaved the people that were already there. And those people had to start practicing circumcision. Am I lying, y'all, or is that what the Bible says? Every servant in your community, in your how do you call it? I guess community had to be circumcised. All these J1s were enslaving people. That's what they're showing. And we see that haplogroup J1 make up these Ishmaelite so-called tribes or clans. And we know that what? They came from the Caucasus. Came from the Caucasus. Came from the Caucasus. The Caucasus. Ooh. Trying to figure out what else I want to go over before I end this video. Hopefully y'all enjoyed this. I was supposed to do this like 2 weeks ago or whenever my last video was, and I just got lazy. I started going live, and once I went live, I lost my the video setup, like the title, the description, the picture, and I was like, man, I got to do all of that again. I don't want to. All right, so now why can't other people of this world, like the Native Americans and whatnot, come from the mountains of Ararat, right? So in this article, a genomic view of the peopling of Americas. That's the authors. The first unambiguous evidence of modern humans in the Americas dates to between 14,000 and 15,000 years ago, and was likely the consequence of migration from Virginia. I don't know. You hear what that sounds like? Beringia. There we go, Beringia. So they have a maternal haplogroup of D4H3A today is almost entirely restricted to Pacific coastal populations, both in North and South America. All right. Alternatively, the patterns could be explained by a larger proportion of ancestry, 2 to 85% from a population that existed in a substructed Northeast Asia and was similar to the main lineage that gave rise to other Native Americans while retaining more Australianism. Australism? I don't know. Let me see. Australasian affinity. We considered the possibility that these genetic patterns related to the claims based on skeletal morphology, that there was a wave of migration related to Australasians that contributed to early Native Americans, followed by later large-scale population replacement by the primary ancestors of present-day Native Americans. All right, so ain't no way that these Native Americans had anything to do with coming down from the Caucasus, from the mountains of Ararat. Peopling of the Americas as inferred from ancient genomics. So before the advent of genomics, genetic evidence for the peopling of the Americas relied on studies of the mitochondrial DNA and the non-recombining portion of the Y chromosome. All right, so this the schematic of the processes of human dispersal and divergence into and within the Americas and the Pleistocene. So this is how they came over. Once again, if this started 24,000 years ago, guess which people had nothing to do with the Bible? Bam! These people right here. These Americans, the people of the New World, of Turtle Island, had nothing to do with the Bible. So Dr. Nathaniel Jeanson tries to claim that somehow they were they're not Japheth, they're not Shem, they're not part of the Bible. And I mean, I understand. That's what everybody's taught to believe, that we're all somehow descendants of Noah and his 3 sons, but that's just not the case. It isn't. People love to believe in a lie rather than hear the truth. When I figured out all this stuff, I'm like, okay, that's this makes more common sense. The Bible is a myth, and it was only talking about a group of people and not of the whole world. Makes absolutely sense to me. But then people attack you and say, "Oh, you're thinking we're pre-Adamites." Absolutely not. I think we're here longer than the Bible tells us that we're here for. That's what I believe. All right, new native South American Y chromosome lineages. The major founder lineage or haplogroup of Native American populations, Q-L54, is defined by the derived ally of the L54 SNP belongs to a haplogroup Q, which in turn is defined by the derived ally at locus N242. Lineage Q-L54, which is currently divided in Native Americans into Q-L54 asterisk excluded M3, and Q-M3 accounts for at least 85% of the autochthonous Y chromosomes of Native Americans. A rare Native American lineage is haplogroup C-M217 or C3, which is defined by marker M217 and is derived from haplogroup C, which is in turn defined by markers M216 and M130. This latter haplogroup is also found among various ethnic groups from Northeast Asia, Australasia, and Oceania. And so from what I believe, like this is going into like the whole concept of how there were like an Asian looking people and a dark skinned looking people that came to America. I believe the C's were looking more like the Malaysians, the darker skinned Malaysians, and the haplogroup Q would look more like Asian. That's why in like Native Americans, some of them had darker features, some of them had lighter features, and then that comes into the people that were coming, like the Vikings and whatnot, also coming over from like Greenland and Newfoundland and all of that. So, but that's just my hypothesis of why some Native Americans had different complexions. All right. Still no questions? Please, y'all, ask me a question. I want to show that I'm actually, interacting with the chat on live. And the craziest part about it is people believe that somehow like it's just I don't know. I don't understand why people believe that one son was black, one son was white, and one son was Asian or red or Native American. It absolutely makes no sense to me. It just makes no sense to me. I mean, I do blame Christianity for spreading that nonsense and trying to make us like all part of like one story of creation of coming down from the mountains of Ararat or the Caucasus, but it's just foolish. I don't believe in that nonsense. You have to make it make sense and do Hobble group gymnastics to make it work. All right. But this is Dr. Nathaniel T. Jeanson. So, this is the foolishness of trying to believe in the young Earth, and showing what they believe in and how evolutionists stretch human history over 2,500,000 years. But young earther creationists put the origin of Adam and Eve about 6,000 years. It's not that the young earthers put him at 6,000, it's because the biblical chronology timeline is dated back to 5,782, not 6,000. They say 6,000, which is coding for your number 6, and 250,000 is coding for your number 7. And you see 4,500 is coding for your number 9. If you understand gematria, you get what I'm saying. The most recent common ancestors of the global flood, human race, about 4,500 years ago at the flood. So you're telling me 4,500 years ago, we all came from this area. Lies. People, when are you going to wake up out of this insomnia, this sleep, this dead sleep that you're in? You got to wake up from this lie. We did not all come from this area 4,500 years ago. Wake up. Get out of that deep sleep that you're in. Come out of that lies. We did not come from here 4,500 years ago. These hobble groups might have. That's what I believe. These hobble groups did, including some R1Bs came down here. And we know that they came to Egypt being the great pharaohs there, the great rulers in Egypt. But did all of our hobble groups come from the mountains of Ararat? Absolutely not. So to connect it back to the flood story is just, it's myth. It's myth. Just like the metaphor myth that the Israelites were held in captivity in Egypt. It's a metaphor. It wasn't literally. It's a metaphor. So if the Canaanite Israelites or Israelite Canaanites don't keep those laws, statutes, and commandments that were given to them, that they will be cursed and they will go back into slavery and go to Egypt and whatnot. But anyways, this whole Dr. Jeanson is something else. Like, tries to include, here we go. For example, mainstream archaeology disputes or rejects the existence of the exodus of Israel from Egypt. I reject it also. Of course it's rejected because it's just a metaphor. There's no primary sources, primary source to prove that a people were calling themselves Israelites or Hebrews and any of that nonsense were held in captivity in Egypt. And what Egypt were they talking about? Were they talking about Egypt in North Africa, or were they talking about Egypt in the Levant? Because what we read earlier, we know that Egypt controlled the Canaanites. They controlled the land of Canaan. So I don't know. But this whole theory of Dr. Jeanson is just complete nonsense. I've already shown that. Native Americans tracing back to their migration pattern to 20,000 plus years ago. I mean, are you kidding me? Even if you want to go back 14,000 years ago, that still doesn't make sense. It still doesn't add up. But this is what a lot of people are starting to believe. They believe this guy because he's a so-called doctor, pushing some pseudo scholarship. And yes, I just said that. Pushing pseudo scholarship. Because if you want to believe in the Bible, but you're not going to show me where the where Ice Age was at, I'm going to look at you like you're crazy. Why doesn't the Bible speak about the Ice Age? But we supposed to be believe in a global flood, but there's no Ice Age? Come on, y'all. Make it make sense. There was no Ice Age, but there was a flood, a global flood. Unless the global flood is metaphorically resembling the Ice Age. I don't know. I'm just saying. And then Neanderthals also. I mean, what about Neanderthals? Why aren't they in the Bible? Why does some people try to correlate the Neanderthals to the Horites? It's just complete nonsense. When the Neanderthals died out, let's see how long ago the Neanderthals died out. 40,000 years ago? So, and here's another thing. Why do they always show Neanderthals as looking like more like Asian or like kind of like European for when they had dark skin? It's crazy that they try to make them to look like they were like a light-skinned people when the actuality that they actually had dark skin, especially the Mediterranean ones and the Middle East ones. They had dark skin. So, but they always try to show that, oh, you know, these Neanderthals had light skin or look kind of like Asian. This is what they kind of they say they look like this guy. How is that dark skin? This ain't dark skin. That is not dark skin. Completely nonsense. This is not a dark skinned man. This is a dark skinned man. That's dark skin. And I don't believe in the whole cheddar man being dark skinned either. I don't believe in that myth. Especially if they want to say that light skin came up 40,000 years ago with, what is it, Cro-Magnon? It's crazy. It's just hilarious when I see these depictions like that. Just hilarious, man. Just complete nonsense. All right, before I end this video, since nobody wants to come chat with me, is I want to bring up the RH factor. RH factor. Have to bring it up. Have to bring it up. All right, so if we're going to take the whole concept that we were created from the dust of the ground, dust of the earth, right? Would our DNA reflect a rhesus monkey or dust with like negative, being negative? So this is what I'm talking about, all right? I'm talking about the RH group blood group system is a human blood group system. It contains proteins on the surface of red blood cells after the ABO blood group system. It is the most likely to be involved in transfusion reactions. So if a woman gives birth, if she's Rh negative, right, and her child is Rh positive, now we had the medicine and the science to, keep the woman alive. But back in the day, if a woman were to give birth and their bloods would like cross, the woman would die if she's Rh negative. Now I'm trying to figure out these blood, like how did that occur? And why is it that only 15% of the world population is Rh negative? How is that? 15%. Only 15% of the world is Rh negative, y'all. %15 of the population has Rh negative blood and the rest are Rh positive. That's crazy. And it's obviously inherited, right? So we have haplogroup O, which stands for the oldest, haplogroup A, haplogroup B, and haplogroup AB. And out of those four, we get negative, Rh factor negative. So I'm trying to figure out if there is some connections, if there is a connection between that and the people that originally came from the Caucasus. Because they claim that Rh factor negative or Rh negative came from Europe originally. It's Europe. The Basque are found to have the highest evidence or incidence of Rh negative blood of any people in the world. So it's just something I thought it was important to bring up to end this video. You can go into that. I can make a separate video and show like different blood types that's found in populations, because I know most people don't do stuff like this. Most people don't talk about, and if they do, I haven't found it. I found like this one lady used to talk about it, but I haven't seen her since. I think she stopped. So it's crazy. And it's crazy how like it's found like certain blood types are found in certain countries. Like this is mine right here. I'm B positive, right? We see what it's found. It's found in Asian countries. And I believe, if I'm not mistaken, I think AB positive was found in ancient Israel. I'm gonna look that up real quick before I end this video. Check this out. The blood groups of 13 skeletons were undiagnosable, and the remaining 55 showed the following distribution: 30.91% A group, 14.54% B group, 50.91% AB group, and 3.64% O group. Y'all, that's crazy, huh? So the people in Israel had AB at 50.91%. So this is between 1600 to 2000 years ago. That's crazy. All right, but since nobody wants to comment, just please leave some feedback. If you like the video, please like it, share it, and I hope you found it informational. I hope you learned some things. If not, just let me know, and I'll try to correct it as best as possible. All right, Biblical DNA out.